There is a terrifyingly quiet moment when you finally put the phone down. You don't send that paragraph. You don't check their last scene. You simply stop. For you, it feels like a funeral, the crushing awareness that your love wasn't enough to save them, that the connection you carried in your chest slipped through your hands. Your mind spirals, replaying every word, every fight, every almost fixed moment. You sit with the hollow echo of absence, wondering how something that felt alive can suddenly feel buried. And in that stillness, your heart tells you a story, that you failed, that you weren't chosen, that walking away means you never mattered as much as you hoped. But have you ever paused to ask what this moment feels like for them? This is the healing mirror. Today, we step inside the psychology of the dismissive avoidant at the exact moment you truly walk away. Not the fake leaving meant to trigger them, not the dramatic silence waiting for a chase, but the real shift, the energetic release, the instant your soul unhooks and surrenders. You might assume that because they pushed you away, your disappearance is what they wanted. You may believe they are relieved, celebrating freedom, breathing easy at last. You would be wrong. Their reaction is not simple relief. It is a neurological shockwave that cracks the structure of their inner world. To understand why, you have to see the invisible script you were both trapped inside. You lived in a biological loop. They withdrew. Your amygdala screamed abandonment, so you chased. You poured love into the silence, and they ran. But here is the uncomfortable truth. They needed you to chase. Even when they called you needy, dramatic, or too much, your pursuit regulated them from the outside. It reassured their wounded core that they were lovable. It soothed their hidden belief of defectiveness. More than that, it confirmed control. As long as you chased, they held the power. Their nervous system adapted to your presence. They relied on the certainty that you were waiting in the background of their life. And then you stop. The script burns. The noise collapses into silence. The supply disappears. And inside that vacuum, the avoidant brain begins to malfunction. The human brain is a prediction machine. For the avoidant, the prediction was simple. You will text, you will call, you will fight, you will return. When that does not happen, the brain registers a prediction error, like a glitch in reality. By walking away, you didn't just remove yourself, you removed the mirror in which they saw their best reflection. You forced them to face the one thing they spend their life escaping: themselves. So breathe for a moment. Let's step into the mind of the one who pushed you away and see what happens when silence finally wins. If you're listening, you're probably hurting, checking your phone, feeling the hollow ache, mourning a connection that meant everything to you because you loved empathetically. Your mirror neurons fire, and you imagine they must feel the same. You picture them alone, staring at your photo, regretting their choices. Now hear the truth, and it will sting like resetting a broken bone. In the first phase, after you leave, the dismissive avoidant does not feel pain. They do not feel regret. They feel relief, euphoric, intoxicating relief. To see why, look at how the avoidant nervous system interprets intimacy. To you, closeness is safety. To them, closeness is pressure. It feels like loss of autonomy, like slow suffocation. When you were chasing, asking for reassurance, trying to fix things, their body translated your love into threat. A background noise of "I am not enough," a constant demand to perform emotionally. When you finally walk away, that weight lifts biologically. Cortisol, the stress hormone, drops. In that drop comes a surge of dopamine. They feel lighter, freer, like oxygen finally hit their lungs. This is deactivation in full force, a survival strategy learned early in life when needing love became dangerous. So the brain learned, turn off need, shut down attachment, flip the switch. When you disappear, they flip it harder than ever. During this relief mirage, their brain suppresses empathy circuits. Normally, if someone you care about hurts, your body mirrors it. But the avoidant has a blocker. They refuse to imagine your pain because guilt would destroy their fragile peace. So they compartmentalize. They shove the memory of you into a mental box, tape it closed, and bury it. They live only in the present. You might see them online looking happier than ever. Friends say they're fine, they work late, pick up hobbies, reconnect with people who demand nothing emotionally. They also build a story, a false narrative. I made the right choice. We weren't compatible. They were too emotional. I'm better alone. This protects their lone wolf identity. It reinforces the belief that self-reliance equals safety. They truly think they escaped the chaos and returned to their default mode, solitude and control. Your silence becomes proof that the relationship was the problem. You're gone, so the problem is gone. But remember the word mirage. A mirage looks like water but has no substance. Relief is not happiness. Happiness is grounded and slow. Relief is chemical and temporary. They are running on borrowed time. They enjoy the quiet, not realizing the silence grows louder every day. They think the story ended. They think the book closed. But they only finish the opening chapter. Weeks pass. The dopamine of freedom fades. The high of escape metabolizes. Now the avoidant feels normal. But the brain hates broken patterns. It craves predictability. You were a pattern. You were the constant. Even when they pushed you away, their brain calculated a near certain probability that you would return. That expectation carved neural roads in their mind. Text, fight, fix, repeat. But you didn't. Now we enter the neuroscience of prediction error. This is when reality doesn't match expectation. The brain whispers, something is wrong. At first, they dismiss it. You're busy. You'll crack. But days stretch into weeks, and the glitch becomes louder. Under the armor of independence, the dismissive avoidant carries a hidden dependency. They use others to regulate self-worth. Your desire regulated their ego. Your chasing made them feel powerful without earning it. When you stop, the mirror disappears. Now they must look at themselves without your flattering light. That triggers dopamine seeking. This chemical pushes the brain to solve a problem. And suddenly, you are the problem. Why aren't they calling? Did they move on? Was I not important? Notice the shift. At first they thought about themselves. Now they think about you. Curiosity becomes the first crack. Not longing yet. That's too vulnerable. Instead it shows as confusion and bruised pride. They check your social media. They hunt for evidence, a sad lyric, a dark quote. Anything proving you still ache. If you're miserable, the old pattern is safe. But if you're silent, or worse, if you're glowing, the prediction error explodes. Silence becomes a void. The comfort of knowing they could always return vanishes. They believed they held the leash. Now they realize it's just a cut rope. The power dynamic flips. They aren't running anymore. They're standing still, looking back, wondering why no footsteps follow. Your absence becomes a presence. And now we reach the paradox of the avoidant attachment style. The part that confuses and breaks people who love deeply. It's called the safety paradox. When you love them hardest, you scared them most. To a dismissive avoidant, intimacy is invasion. When you wanted time, emotions, reassurance, connection, their amygdala lit up. Your needs felt like loss of self. Your love felt like a cage. Every text became a demand. Every question felt like interrogation. Every "I love you" carried obligation. Their sympathetic nervous system stayed in fight or flight around you. They weren't running from you as a person, they were running from the pressure your closeness created. But now you've stepped back. You removed the pressure. You removed the pursuit. And by doing so, you accidentally deactivate their threat system. The alarm stops ringing. And in that calm space, something strange happens. For the avoidant, space becomes seductive. Distance becomes attraction. They only desire what they can't fully possess. They are wired to love from afar because distance feels safe. When silence stretches between you, you no longer threaten their independence. You no longer engulf them. And because you aren't a threat, their brain allows the drawbridge to lower just a little. Where your presence once triggered fear, your absence now triggers curiosity. Where closeness once suffocated, distance now feels magnetic. They start remembering without panic. They replay moments without pressure. They feel emotion without obligation. And this is the cruel irony. The moment you stop trying to be close is the moment closeness finally becomes safe for them. They begin to rebuild your image inside their mind. When you were together and chasing them, they saw you through a distorted lens. You were the nagging one, the clingy one, the emotional weight. Their brain highlighted every flaw, every irritation, every rough edge to justify pushing you away. It zoomed in on conflict and blurred out your warmth. But once you are gone, that lens fractures. Without the daily pressure of your needs, the distortion fades. They start seeing you as a person again. They remember that you're funny. They remember that you're intelligent. They remember your smile, the kind that softened rooms. They remember how you looked at them before the fights replaced curiosity. They begin separating two versions of you. One was the partner who required effort. The other was the human who was actually remarkable. This is the tragedy of the avoidant mind. They often value someone more in absence than they ever could in presence. You become a safe object of desire. They can fantasize about you. They can hold you gently in thought. They can even feel affection again. Why? Because you're no longer there asking for anything. Loving you from a distance costs nothing. It requires no compromise, no vulnerability, no exposure. It becomes a sterile, protected version of love. A gravitational pull starts forming, not because they healed, not because they awakened spiritually, but because you became safe again. You are no longer the fire that burned them. You become the distant star in a cold sky, beautiful to observe, harmless to admire, impossible to touch. And this special kind of safety becomes the doorway to the next phase. Once fear quiets and safety stabilizes, the brain finally makes room for what they thought they erased: memory. Now we are deep in the timeline. Weeks become a month, maybe 2. You remain silent. You hold your ground. Inside the avoidant mind, a strange psychological process unfolds. It's called the fading effect bias. Research shows that for most people, painful and pleasant memories fade at similar speeds. But for avoidance, negative emotion fades faster than positive emotion. Remember how they once magnified your flaws and arguments? The brain is an efficient editor. Now that the relationship is no longer a threat, it no longer needs those defenses. It no longer needs to remember your neediness to keep distance, so it deletes it. The anxiety, the suffocation, the irritation evaporate like fog. What remains is the highlight reel. The hippocampus, the center for long-term memory, activates, but it doesn't play the full movie. It loops the golden scenes. It drags them back to the beginning. They remember the first date. They remember how you laughed at jokes nobody else noticed. They remember the chemistry. They remember feeling understood without explanation. They remember the version of you that required nothing. The version before attachment wounds were triggered. This becomes the Phantom X phenomenon. Dismissive avoidants are famous for romanticizing past partners. They hold candles for relationships that feel perfect in memory. But the secret is this: those relationships were never perfect while they lived inside them. They only became perfect once they ended. And now you are becoming the phantom. You are being canonized. You're lifted into sainthood inside their mind. They remove your humanity, your fears, your needs, your complexity, and turn you into a symbol of lost love, a symbol of the one that slipped away. They drive past a place you once shared, and instead of relief, they feel a sting of nostalgia. They smell a familiar perfume in a crowd, and their chest tightens. For a second, time freezes, but be careful. This is not awakening. They miss the idea of you, not the responsibility of you. They miss your essence, not your reality. They are loving a ghost. Because you stay silent, you don't interrupt the illusion. The ghost grows stronger. If you texted now, "I miss you," the image would collapse. You'd remind them of the real you. Needs would reappear. Alarms would sound, walls would rise, idealization would vanish. But because you don't reach out, you stay perfect. You remain untouchable memory. And that memory begins to follow them. It rides in their car. It sits beside them in silence. It sleeps in the empty space of their bed. The safety paradox lowered their defenses. The Phantom X effect loaded nostalgia. Now they are exposed. The walls they built to keep you out begin trapping them inside their own head. Silence stops feeling peaceful. It becomes dense, heavy, suffocating, and that pressure leads to the crash. Now comes the tipping point. Relief has expired. Curiosity has become tension. Nostalgia has turned into haunting. And the internal collapse starts. This stage arrives suddenly. Maybe at 2 months, maybe 3. But when it hits hard. It begins with their core wound activating. Beneath the independence and armor, most dismissive avoidants hide one belief: I am defective, or I can't be loved properly. They usually avoid this wound by blaming you. As long as they say, "My partner was too needy," they don't have to face themselves. You become the villain. They become the victim. But you left. You stopped chasing. You're okay without them. Now the scapegoat disappears. They can't blame your closeness anymore because you're the one creating distance. So the logic flips inward. The story changes from "they were too much" to "I wasn't enough. I ruined it. I had someone who loved me and I pushed them away. I'm broken. I'll end up alone." This realization triggers an amygdala hijack. Anxiety floods the system, but it's not the fear of engulfment anymore. It's the primal fear of isolation. It usually shows up at night. During the day, they distract with work, gym, noise, people. But at 2 a.m., suppression fails. They stare at the ceiling. Their chest feels hollow, a vacuum where your energy once lived. They try to fill it. This is when avoidants often rebound. They download apps. They go on easy dates. People who don't challenge them, but it backfires. Comparison syndrome takes over. They sit across from someone new and instantly measure them against you. This person doesn't know their coffee order, doesn't get their humor, doesn't carry history. The shallow safety feels empty, like eating cardboard while starving. They realize the drama they hated with you was actually passion. The needs they resisted were actually connection. And a harsh truth lands. They're bored. Bored of small talk. Bored of games. Bored of emotional flatness. They start craving what they ran from. Your intensity. Your depth. You weren't just a partner. You were their external regulator. You helped them feel alive. Without you, they feel numb, emotionally blocked, unable to grieve, unable to escape. They hover over your name. They type, "Hey, I was thinking about you," then delete it. Shame stops them. Ego blocks them. They fear rejection now, because rejection would confirm their worst belief: I am defective. So they suffer quietly. They drive past your places. They watch your friends. They replay old voice notes. They live in a prison built from their own walls. They know something must change. They know they should reach out, but they forgot the language of vulnerability. So instead of knocking, they test. They throw a small pebble at your window just to see if you're still home. This is the point where most people collapse. This is the point where the silence finally cracks. But it never breaks with drama. It doesn't arrive with flowers, apologies, or a handwritten note on your doorstep. It arrives as a whisper. In dating psychology, this is called the safe outreach. Most people recognize it as breadcrumbing after the internal crash. The avoidant is desperate to calm their anxiety. They need proof that you're still there. They need reassurance that they didn't permanently destroy the bridge. But their ego, that thick, armored ego, refuses vulnerability. Saying, I messed up, admits defectiveness. Saying, I miss you, hands you power. And if there's one thing the avoidant nervous system cannot tolerate, it's surrendering control. So they create a workaround. They need to touch without being touched back. They need to check if the door is unlocked without stepping inside. They need plausible deniability. They reach out in a way that allows retreat if you reject them. If you ignore them, they can tell themselves they never cared anyway. It starts with orbiting. You notice their name floating at the top of your story views. They're watching quietly, collecting information. Are you sad? Are you dating? Do you look better than before? Then comes the digital tap. They like a photo from weeks ago. They react to a story with a generic emoji, a flame, a laugh, a heart. Then comes the lowest effort message, something unrelated to the relationship. Did you see that trailer? I found that book you wanted. Happy birthday. Sometimes late, sometimes empty, sometimes just, hey. Don't misunderstand this. It isn't a conversation. It's a pulse check. They're placing a thermometer in the water to test the temperature. If you respond instantly, emotionally, with paragraphs and curiosity, you just confirmed something powerful. You're still waiting. They're still the prize. Their anxiety drops. Their ego relaxes. The nervous system exhales. And often, they disappear again. Why? Because they got the validation hit they needed. The supply was restored. But underneath this is a deeper mechanism. It's called rejection sensitivity. Despite the cool exterior, avoidants are deeply afraid of rejection. Their brain processes rejection like physical pain. By sending a meme instead of an apology, they protect themselves. If you ignore the meme, they can say, they just didn't like it. But if they sent, I miss you, and you ignored that, it would crush them. So they hedge. They reach with minimal emotional risk. This is where empaths get trapped. Your heart jumps. You think this is it. They finally understand. But they haven't understood your pain. They've only felt their own. They're not reaching out to heal you. They're reaching out to regulate themselves. They're checking whether you're still an option, whether you're still on the shelf if they decide to come back later. So what do? This is the real test of discipline. If you engage too eagerly, you reset the cycle. You reward crumbs. You teach them they can disappear, return with nothing, and still access your energy. But if you hold your position or match their tone with calm distance, something shifts. When safe outreach fails, they face a choice: retreat forever or escalate. Some vanish, others are forced to bring more. They have to drop the cool mask and speak honestly, because breadcrumbs stop working when hunger grows. And starving people can't afford pride. Now we reach the final stage of the avoidant timeline. It doesn't happen for everyone. It only happens when you truly move on. When you stop playing emotional chess. When you stop watching your phone. It happens when they look at you, in real life or through a screen, and see something more frightening than your needs ever were. They see you happy, not performative happiness, not revenge glow, but quiet, grounded peace. You're laughing with friends, you're succeeding, you look settled, safe in yourself. And in that moment, the power inversion completes. Before, the relationship revolved around your need. You were the consumer, they were the supplier. That dynamic fed their ego. It told them they were essential. But when they see you thriving without them, the story collapses. Their subconscious registers a brutal truth. They were never the prize. You were. If you were the problem, you'd be breaking down, but you're blooming, so the fault can't be yours. That realization slices through defenses. Neuroscience calls this loss aversion. Humans feel loss twice as strongly as gain, but for avoidance, the loss is specific. They didn't just lose a partner, they lost their safe harbor. You were the one place they could partially unmask, the one who saw the frightened child under the armor and stayed, the one willing to do emotional labor for someone who barely knew how to feel. And now they understand, with a sinking heaviness, that they burned that bridge themselves. They look at freedom, the quiet apartment, the empty phone, the shallow dates, and realize it isn't freedom, it's exile. You weren't the anchor holding them back from the sea. You were the anchor keeping them from drifting into cold, endless water. So, what happens now? The road splits, and there are two endings. First path, vulnerability wins. The pain of losing you becomes greater than the fear of intimacy. This is when they might finally reach out honestly, not with a meme, not with, hey, but with truth. They apologize, they admit fear, they show up shaken but real. This is rock bottom that creates change. Second path, shame wins. For many avoidants, realizing they destroyed the best thing they ever had is unbearable. Shame whispers, you don't deserve repair. You already ruined it. Don't disturb them again. So they don't return. Not because they don't care, but because they can't face the mirror you represent. They choose exile over vulnerability. They live with the ghost of you. You become the internal standard. Everyone else fails quietly against your memory. They watch from distance, sometimes for years, loving in silence, regretting in silence, trapped by silence. It's tragic, a Shakespearean tragedy of fear-beating love. But here is what matters most. Whether they return trembling or disappear forever, the outcome for you is the same. You didn't win by defeating them. You won by reclaiming yourself. You stopped dancing to music that hurt your feet. You stopped pouring water into a cracked cup. You let them carry the weight of their own choices, and by releasing that burden, you freed your own hands. We've spent this entire journey dissecting the avoidant mind, their relief, their curiosity, their nostalgia, their collapse, their regret. But the real story was never about what happens inside their head. The real story is what finally happens inside yours. It is about what is unfolding inside you. For a long time, you acted like a rehabilitation center for a soul that never wanted to be repaired. You offered your heart as a resting space for someone who was frightened of rest. You believed that if you loved them harder, if you explained yourself clearer, if you waited just a little longer, they would finally recognize your value. But when you finally gave up, you didn't fail. You didn't abandon the race. You realized you were running on a treadmill. You were running endlessly, sweating, hurting, breaking, but never actually moving forward. You were exhausting your spirit for motion without progress. And when you stepped off that machine, you didn't lose them. You rescued yourself. You chose direction over illusion. You chose reality over repetition. The moment you stopped chasing, something powerful happened. You shattered the hypnotic grip of intermittent reinforcement. You cut the dopamine circuit that kept you addicted to crumbs instead of nourishment. You broke free from a system that trained your heart to survive on almost love. For so long, you carried a mirror for them. You held it up, hoping they would see how lovable they truly were. You tried to show them their own light through your devotion. But one day, you took that mirror back, and instead of pointing it at them, you turned it toward yourself. And in the quiet of your own company, I hope you like what you see. I hope you see someone capable of deep, relentless love. I hope you see loyalty that doesn't waver. I hope you see courage, the kind that faces emptiness alone rather than accept a relationship that feels like a prison. I hope you see a heart that refuses to shrink just to be chosen. The avoidant may return. They often do. History and psychology show that when fear fades and nostalgia grows loud, they circle back. They remember what they lost. They remember what felt safe from a distance. But when they come back, you might realize something unexpected. You are no longer the same person who waited. You are no longer sitting by the door of their uncertainty. Their shock may mean nothing to you because you are no longer searching for their validation to prove you are real. You don't exist because they see you. You exist because you breathe. You are worthy because you are alive. So let them feel their relief. Let them feel their confusion. Let them feel the collapse. That is their journey. That is their consequence. That is the lesson their soul has to face in this lifetime. Your lesson is different. Your lesson is learning that you don't have to burn yourself just to keep someone else warm. You don't have to sacrifice your peace to protect another person's fear. Love is not supposed to feel like self-erasure. Love is not supposed to feel like starvation. Walk away, then keep walking, and don't turn around, because the version of you that accepted bare minimum is gone. The version of you that begged for consistency is finished, and the version of you rising from the ashes of this silence is the one they will feel the loss of for the rest of their lives.